The void had been Kael Weston's only companion for the last 5 standard cycles. His ship, the salvaged patrol cutter, the Swift, was barely more than a cockpit bolted to an engine, smelling perpetually of ozone and stale synth coffee. Kael wasn't a military man like the original owner. He was a void runner, scraping a living, pulling valuable metals from the debris fields that ringed the fringes of the Orion Spur. Most days were boring, a slow meditation of sensor pings and trajectory calculations. His co-pilot, a synthetic named Cora Vance, who existed only as a sharp, holographic blue shimmer on his main console, was currently running diagnostics on the jump drive for the 10th time. "Kael, I'm detecting a severe thermal imbalance in the flux capacitor again." Cora's voice was crisp and slightly disappointed. "And the coffee is dangerously low. We should turn back to port 12 inches. "We're not turning back, Cora," Kael muttered, rubbing the grime from the viewport. "Not until we hit the payout jackpot. The nav buoy cluster is just ahead. Big money floating in there. I can feel it." As if to immediately refute his optimistic sentiment, the console lit up not with a salvage signature, but with a screaming, high-priority distress beacon. It was a signal Kael had never encountered before, an elegant, complex harmonic sequence that his outdated translator struggled to even categorize. It was certainly not human. "Distress signal confirmed, Kael," Cora reported, her blue form snapping to attention. "Originating from the Deep Scythe Nebula, beyond the Navbuoy cluster. That area is restricted space, high risk, and definitely off-limits to civilian traffic." Kael felt a familiar, unwelcome jolt of adrenaline. The Deep Scythe Nebula was infamous, a graveyard of lost exploration ships and the suspected haunt of the galactic sector's most ruthless pirate factions, the Krill. No sane being entered that swirling cloud of purple gas and shattered rock voluntarily. "Can you filter the signal?" Kael leaned closer to the console. "What are they saying?" Cora's shimmer intensified, a sign of heavy computational load. "The language is Aethelgardian, highly advanced, complex dialect. It's also extremely weak, almost gone. We have a name, or perhaps a title. Heir Selena," and 2 words repeated, "malicious breach. Containment failure." Kael frowned. Aethelgardians were practically myth. Their empire was ancient, isolationist, and infinitely technologically superior, located deep in the core worlds, far from human space. He'd never even seen a blurry image of one. They certainly didn't crash their ships in the outer rim. "The coordinates placed them right in the heart of the nebula's gravitational singularity," Cora continued, her voice edged with alarm. "If we divert, we'll be putting the Swift under extreme stress, maybe even risking structural integrity, and it violates 7 interspecies travel protocols." Kael gripped the controls. The money in the Navbuoy cluster suddenly seemed irrelevant. He wasn't a hero, but he also wasn't the kind of man who could listen to a desperate signal and do nothing, protocol be damned. Especially one tied to such a powerful, unknown civilization. "To hell with protocol," Kael said, pushing the throttle forward. The old engines protested with a deep, grinding shudder. "Boost the shields and route all power to forward thrust." "We're going in. Tell me everything you can about Aethelgardian ship structure, crash protocols, anything." "We're on a rescue run, Cora." "Acknowledged, Captain," Cora replied, the hint of disapproval gone, replaced by professional determination. "Engaging emergency power. Estimated time of arrival, T-minus 35 minutes. Pray your life support seals hold, Kael. This is going to be a bumpy ride. The nebula's electromagnetic interference is already causing sensor flickering." Kael focused on the controls, weaving the Swift past the initial, smaller chunks of rock that served as the nebula's outer boundary. The light outside went from the clear black of space to a turbulent, deep purple haze. The ship began to shake violently, the hull groaning under the strain. He could hear the metallic screeching of debris impacting the reinforced plating. The Swift was built for tough vacuum, but not this kind of constant, kinetic punishment. "Damage reports, Cora," Kael yelled over the rattling. "Shields are holding at 65%. She projected the status onto the main viewport in a calming green font. "Minor hull breaches detected in Cargo Bay 5. We're losing atmosphere slowly there, but the environmental control system is compensating. The primary threat remains the debris field. Their distress signal is spiking, Kael. They're right in the thick of it." He wrestled the controls, dodging a piece of wreckage the size of a small moon. The maneuver sent him reeling against his restraints, and the proximity alarm screamed. It was blind flying, relying entirely on his instinct and Cora's constantly updating trajectory projections. "Describe the wreckage," Kael commanded. "Massive fragmentation signature. It's a large vessel, unlike anything cataloged by the Human Confederacy. It's built of a silicate-based alloy, shimmering gold and dark violet. Extremely ornate, clearly royal or diplomatic class. It's torn apart, Captain. No survivors is the logical conclusion." "Logic is overrated," Kael grunted, pulling hard on the yoke to avoid a spinning chunk of hull that nearly scraped the Swift's port wing. "Keep looking for life signs. Find me the strongest energy output, something that could house a survival pod or a shielded section." Minutes crawled by, each one a relentless assault on the cutter. Kyle's hands ached, slick with sweat inside his gloves. He could feel the heat radiating from the overworked console. Just as despair was beginning to set in, a small, triumphant chime sounded. "Life sign detected," Cora announced, her voice steadier now. "Single reading. Faint, but definitely there. They're not in a pod, Kael. They're clinging to a piece of the main drive housing. Coordinates locked." Kael strained his eyes through the viewport's haze, guiding the Swift toward the indicated coordinates. And then he saw it. Floating amidst the glittering alien wreckage, pieces of violet and gold metal, was a figure. Clad in an ornate, cracked environmental suit, the figure was holding onto the jagged edge of a cooling fin, their grip clearly failing. Kael brought the cutter to a halt, stabilizing it through short, controlled bursts of the maneuvering thrusters. The ship was positioned approximately 50 meters from the survivor. "Kael, no," Cora's voice was sharp with fear. "Don't even think about a spacewalk. It's a death trap out there. We can extend the magnetic tow cable, but you know how unreliable it is at this distance. The tow cable won't reach in time." "Look at them," Kael said, his voice flat. He could see the survivor's delicate, armored fingers slipping. He didn't wait for permission or argument. He unbuckled his safety harness. "Prepare the airlock, Cora. Oxygen levels check on my auxiliary suit. I'm going out." "You are violating the prime directive of self-preservation, Captain," Cora shot back, a digital frown in her voice. "We don't know this species, Kael. Their suit might be pressurized differently, or they could carry unknown contagions, or they might even be hostile." Kael pulled on his bulky emergency suit, ignoring the warnings. He checked the suit's oxygen tank and seal. "If I do nothing, they die. That's all I need to know. We make our own rules out here, remember?" Cora was silent for a moment. Then, with a sound of mechanical resignation, the airlock began to cycle. "Target lock established for airlock retrieval. Propulsion jets in your suit are synchronized with the Swift's navigation grid. Godspeed, Kael. If an asteroid so much as scratches your helmet, you're dead, and so are we." The outer door slid open, revealing the silent, purple-tinged chaos of the nebula. He pushed off, using his suit's small jets to propel himself toward the figure. He saw the survivor's head turn, and their large, gold-flecked eyes, visible through the cracked visor, widened in fear, or perhaps confusion, at the sight of the unfamiliar human suit. Their last remaining finger slipped. Kael accelerated. He reached out and grabbed the survivor's arm just as their body began to drift away into the tumbling debris. He pulled them tight against his own suit, wrapping his other arm around their small, light frame. "Got you," he whispered into the helmet mic, knowing they couldn't possibly understand. "You're safe." He fired his jets, battling the slow rotation of the debris field, and began the terrifying, slow journey back to the Swift's waiting airlock. Every second he expected a piece of rock to tear them both apart, but miraculously, they made it. Cora, operating the cutter with surgical precision, had the airlock open immediately. Kael dragged the alien inside, and the door hissed shut. Once the airlock repressurized, Kael peeled off his helmet. Cora's holographic form materialized inside the small space, her blue light scanning the alien figure. Kael carefully worked the seals on the ornate, damaged suit. As the suit's helm retracted with a soft, expensive sound, the face of the survivor was revealed. She was exquisitely beautiful, with skin that seemed to faintly glow with a soft, inner luminescence, and long silver hair that was perfectly braided. Her features were delicate, her cheekbones high, and her large gold-flecked eyes were now half-lidded, focused weakly on Kael. She was royalty, Kael realized instantly, judging by the regal bearing, even in distress. She lifted a trembling hand, her lips parting as she spoke in the same musical, complex language that had come across the distress signal. The cutter's ship-wide translator activated, projecting the rough translation. "The one who bore the starlight into the Deep Scythe. You saved the high heir of Aethelgard. You are touched by the fates." Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in Kael's arms. "Aethelgardian life signs are fading fast, Kael," Cora said, her voice now a mix of clinical urgency and shock. "She's in critical condition. We need a proper medical bay, and we need it now. I'm plotting a course for the nearest human medical station, Beacon Sigma." Kael gently laid the princess, the high heir, Selena, down on the airlock's floor, cradling her head. Her skin was cool, and the luminescence was dimming. "Get us out of the nebula, Cora." Full burn. And then send a priority signal to Beacon Sigma. Tell them we're bringing in the high heir of Aethelgard. Tell them to prepare for first contact. Kael looked at the unconscious, beautiful alien in his arms. My life just got a hell of a lot more complicated. The journey to Beacon Sigma was a blur of high-speed transit and frantic attempts to stabilize Selena. The human doctors on the station were bewildered and overwhelmed. They were equipped for broken bones, radiation sickness, and common human ailments, not advanced alien biology. Dr. Jian, the head medic, a harried woman with weary eyes, stood over Selena, her hands hovering uselessly over the shimmering silver skin. "We have no data, Pilot Weston," Dr. Jean whispered to Kael, who refused to leave the side of the medical bay. "Her internal temperature is stable, but her blood composition is utterly alien. Her respiratory system uses an oxygen-nitrogen mix, but her heart rate, if that's what this organ is wildly erratic. Any human medication could kill her instantly." Kael felt a cold despair. He had risked everything to save her, only to watch her die because of ignorance. "Have you reached her people?" Kael asked. Cora transmitted the priority signal and the unique Aethelgardian identifiers, Dr. Jian replied, adjusting a monitor. "We received a confirmation code minutes ago, a single message. Highly encrypted, but the translation was clear. The beacon is lit. Stand by for the Sovereign Fleet. Do not approach. Do not interfere." The Sovereign Fleet. Kael imagined the sheer power of Aethelgardian warships, making a jump into human space. This wasn't a rescue. It was an invasion of protocol. How long until they arrive? Dr. Jian checked her chrono. The message indicated a jump sequence initiating immediately, which suggests their current position is closer than we imagined. 6 standard days at minimum. Can she last that long? I don't know, Dr. Jian admitted, shaking her head. We're maintaining life support based on her suit's remaining environmental data, which is dwindling. She needs specialized medical attention now, Kael, not in 6 days. She needs to wake up and tell us something. Kael sat by Selina's bedside, the silence of the sterile medical bay broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the human monitoring machines. He stared at her face, perfect and still, the faint golden flecks in her eyes closed. He spoke to her, his voice a low, steady drone. He told her about Earth, about the oceans, about the freedom of open space, and about the sheer stupidity of being a void runner. He was talking not just to comfort her, but to keep himself from screaming at the injustice of the situation. 3 days passed. Selina's condition remained terrifyingly static. Then, on the dawn of the 4th day, as Kael slumped in his chair, half asleep, he heard a small intake of breath. Selina's eyes fluttered open. The gold flecks in her irises seemed to catch the harsh medical light, burning brightly. Kael was instantly awake. Her first word, translated instantly by the implant in Kael's ear, was his name. Kael Weston, she whispered, her voice like chimes. I'm here, heir Selina. Don't try to move. You stayed, she murmured, a flicker of a smile touching her lips. I saw your face through the haze, the one who gave breath back to the air. I owe you more than a simple debt, human. I owe you the luminance. Kael shook his head. You don't owe me anything. I just want you to get better. Why were you attacked? Your ship was magnificent. It was clearly not an accident. Selina's expression hardened, the smile vanishing. It was not a random disaster. It was the doing of my mother's enemies, the Vizier Theron and his cohort. They opposed the Empress Vastra's initiatives, her attempts to end our ancient isolation and integrate Aethelgard with the galactic community. I am the symbol of that change. My death would have crippled her movement and put Theron on the path to power. Theron, Kael repeated, the name tasting like ash. He tried to kill you. And failed, Selina said, pushing herself up slightly, though her movement was shaky. Because of you. And that failure is what changes everything, Kael. In Aethelgard, the saving of the high heir, particularly when tied to a specific ancient bloodline, triggers a rarely invoked sacrament of unbreakable bond. Your act of pure courage, your luminance in the darkness, has tethered your soul to mine. A tether, Kael frowned. I'm just a pilot. I pulled you out of a wreck. Selina reached out and placed her hand on his, her skin warm and surprisingly soft. The Empress has already initiated the ritual by acknowledging your service with the title Beacon of Aethelgard. You cannot simply be rewarded and sent home, Kael. The law demands you become the official sworn protector of the High Heir. You are now irrevocably bound to my destiny. Kael stared at their joined hands. This was beyond politics. It sounded like fate. I'm going to be completely honest, Kael said, pulling his hand away gently. That sounds a lot like being kidnapped with better benefits. Selina laughed, a soft musical sound that made Dr. Jian, who had been silently monitoring, turn her head in surprise. The alternatives are worse, Selina countered, her eyes earnest. If you refuse, the law is nullified, and Theron will have cause to argue that you are a foreign agent whose life debt is not genuine, making you a threat to the heir. You would be executed immediately for unauthorized proximity to the sovereign line. She took his hand again, her grip firmer this time. My mother, Empress Vastra, is coming, Kael. And she is coming to claim what ancient law now says belongs to the throne. You are no longer just a human, a pilot, or a void runner. You are a crucial piece of Aethelgardian destiny. Please say you will accept this, Kael. I need you to stand by me. 2 days later, the Sovereign fleet arrived. It didn't just jump into the system, it folded space, appearing instantly as a sudden impossible bloom of golden light and violet-black hull plating directly over Beacon Sigma. There were 3 massive warships, sleek and impossibly elegant, dwarfing the tiny human outpost. And in the center, a vessel of unimaginable beauty. The Royal Transport, a ship built of glistening liquid silver metal, adorned with towering spires that seemed to pierce the sky. The Empress Vastra's presence was a seismic event. All operations on Beacon Sigma ceased. Kael, clad in the sharp, official human Confederacy uniform he hadn't worn since he bought the Swift, stood with Selena, now fully healed and regal in flowing violet robes, and Dr. Gian on the primary docking platform. A delegation of human military brass had scrambled to arrive, their faces pale with terror and awe. The airlock of the Royal Transport opened with a soft, authoritative hiss. First came the Praetorians, Aethelgardian guards, 7 feet tall, clad in armor that seemed to be woven from solidified starlight, their weapons humming with contained energy. They fanned out with frightening efficiency, locking down the entire platform. Then came the court officials. Among them, Kael instantly recognized the man Selena had described, Vizier Theron. He was tall and lean, with a severe face, and wore robes of deep obsidian that contrasted sharply with his pale silver skin. His eyes, the color of frozen twilight, swept over the human delegation with naked contempt. When his gaze fell on Kael, it lingered, a cold, predatory assessment. Finally, Empress Vastra emerged. She was taller than Selena, and more imposing, radiating a quiet, absolute power that made the air feel thick and heavy. She wore a crown of living crystal that pulsed with a faint inner light, and her robes were stitched with fine gold thread, depicting ancient Aethelgardian cosmology. She walked with the deliberate, unhurried grace of someone who knew the world would wait for her. Empress Vastra went straight to her daughter, embracing Selena with genuine maternal warmth. "My high heir, you have returned to the light." The Empress's voice was deep, melodic, and instantly translated. "Mother, I live only because of the courage of this human," Selena replied, her voice steady and respectful. She then gestured to Kael. "Kael Weston, the beacon of Aethelgard, and the one who bears the unbreakable bond." The Empress turned her full attention to Kael. He felt the weight of 20 millennia of history bearing down on him. Her gold-flecked eyes, identical to Selena's, but colder, smarter, analyzed him, from his scuffed boots to his nervous gaze. "You are Kael Weston," Empress Vastra stated. "A commoner, a pilot, a scavenger. You performed an act of singular bravery, placing your life beneath that of my daughter." "I did what anyone would do, Your Majesty," Kael managed, keeping his voice steady despite the rapid drumming of his heart. A faint smile touched the Empress's lips, a smile that did not reach her eyes. "In your primitive culture, perhaps. In Aethelgard, such an act, when performed for the sovereign line, carries with it an eternal covenant. The sacrament of the unbreakable bond is invoked. You have saved the high heir. Now the high heir shall claim you. You are no longer your own." The Empress's eyes scanned the human military officers, who all instinctively took a step back. "Lieutenant General Harris," the Empress addressed the highest-ranking human officer present. "By ancient decree, Kael Weston is now a ward of the Aethelgardian crown. His duties and obligations to your confederacy are hereby dissolved. He is to accompany us immediately to the capital world. This is not a request. It is the decree of the sovereign of Aethelgard. General Harris stammered, his face white. Your Majesty, we need time to process this. International law. I am not interested in the laws of minor stellar confederacies, Empress Vastra interrupted, her tone cutting. I am interested in Aethelgardian law, which now governs this man's existence. He leaves with us in 1 hour. Ensure his passage is smooth, or you will face consequences far greater than a breach of international law. The Empress then turned back to Kael, her expression shifting slightly to a calculating curiosity. Gather your belongings, Beacon. Prepare yourself. Your life on the Aethelgard is about to begin. Kael barely had time to pack a single bag of clothes and his old, tattered picture of Earth's blue marble. He said a quick, silent goodbye to Dr. Jian and General Harris, who looked at him with a mix of pity and fear. Cora, his synthetic co-pilot, materialized on the small datapad he carried. This is insane, Kyle, Cora whispered digitally. You are literally being shanghaied by an alien queen because of some mystical life debt. Don't forget your datapad. I can serve as your translator and a digital life raft on that ship. I'm not forgetting you, Cora, Kael promised, clutching the datapad. She called me Beacon, and the princess called it Illuminance. They're building a narrative around me. And the narrative's villain is Vizier Theron, Cora reminded him. He was staring at you like you were a disease. Be careful. The Queen may have claimed you, but he'll be looking for any excuse to sever that bond permanently. Kyle was escorted onto the royal transport, a dazzling labyrinth of polished crystal and metallic filigree. His quarters were larger than his entire ship, with walls that responded to his touch and a view of the stars that looked almost artificial in its perfection. He felt utterly out of place, a piece of rough, dull carbon dropped into a case of cut diamonds. Selena came to see him that evening. She was no longer the frail patient. She was the high heir, surrounded by a faint aura of authority and sadness. I am sorry for the abruptness of my mother's decree, Selena said, sitting opposite him on a couch that molded itself to her form. She had no choice. Theron is powerful. By invoking the sacrament of unbreakable bond and declaring you the Beacon, she has made your relationship with me a matter of law and prophecy. It makes it harder for him to touch you. Prophecy? Kael asked, intrigued. I thought you said it was law. Selena nodded, her silver hair shimmering. It is both. An old prophecy states that a beacon from the outsider worlds, one who carries the courage of the sunless void, will save the high heir from the shadow of the inner circle and become the sentinel of the heir's reign. If you are publicly recognized as this sentinel, the balance of power shifts. My mother is using you as a shield against Theron, Kael. A human shield, Kael summarized dryly. And what does the sentinel do? Selena looked down at her hands, her voice dropping. He becomes my companion, my confidant, my protector. He lives within the royal court, attends all my ceremonies, and his voice carries weight in my presence. But most importantly, the sacrament of the unbreakable bond implies that the protector becomes the only acceptable mate for the high heir. It's an archaic addition to the law, but it's still on the books. Kael's mind reeled. Mate, Selena, I'm a human. You live for 200 years. You're the high heir of a galactic empire. This is impossible. Impossible is what you do best, Kael, Selena said, looking up, her gold-flecked eyes full of unexpected resolve. You flew into the Deep Scythe Nebula for me. Our cultures, our biology, our lifespan, it's all irrelevant to the ancient law. The Queen's power is absolute, but she is bound by tradition. By invoking the bond, she has given me a chance to choose my own path and my own partner, outside of the arranged marriage she had planned with Theron's cousin, Lord Kaelin. That arrangement was key to Theron's power. Kael realized the sheer depth of the political maneuver. He wasn't just a guard, he was a spanner, thrown into the finely tuned gears of an alien empire's political machine. So Theron tried to kill you, and now I'm the obstacle to his plan, Kael stated. Exactly, Selena affirmed, and now he has to eliminate you. He cannot directly challenge my mother's decree, but he will use every subtlety, every custom, every loophole in Aethelgardian law to discredit you. If you show disrespect or ignorance, or simply fail to adapt, he will have you removed and executed. You need to learn our customs quickly, Kael, for your life and for my future. Kael nodded, the gravity of the situation settling upon him. Then start teaching, heir. I'm a fast learner. For the 2-week transit across the core systems, Selena became Kael's private tutor. She taught him the basics of Aethelgardian, a language that flowed like water and glittered like quartz. She instructed him on the impossibly complex hierarchy of the court, the subtle hand gestures that communicated respect, dismissal, or contempt, and the proper way to address different ranks of nobility. When you address a vizier, Selena explained one afternoon, holding his hand and guiding it into a precise, triple-jointed bow, you must hold eye contact until the second dip, then avert your gaze, indicating respect for their rank, but not submission to their person. Vizier Theron will be watching your every movement. And if I mess it up, Kael asked, his muscles aching from the unfamiliar stiffness of the bow. He will call you a crude and uncultivated beast, and the court will laugh. If you mess it up 3 times in public, he can petition the Empress for a cultural evaluation that could lead to your forced removal, Selena warned. He is cunning, Kael. He knows he cannot challenge the power of the bond, but he can challenge the worthiness of the beacon. Kael felt the enormous pressure of having to represent not just himself, but the entire human species on this grand stage. He studied diligently, poring over ancient texts and historical data Cora provided on his datapad. He ate the exquisite Aethelgardian food, which tasted like melted sunsets and spiced moons, and wore the formal robes Selena had provided, which were irritatingly stiff but undeniably impressive. One evening, Selena found Kael sitting alone, staring out the vast observation window. The ship was approaching a massive, luminous nebula, the gateway to their home cluster. You look troubled, Beacon, she said softly, approaching him. I feel like a performing pet, Selena, Kael admitted, turning to her. I'm a pilot. I solve problems with engines and thrust, not bowing and subtle contempt. I don't belong here. I'm worried that by accepting this title, I'm simply walking into a cage you've built to protect yourself, and that cage will eventually become my tomb. Selena sat next to him, her violet robes pooling around her. She reached for his hand, tracing the calluses on his palm from years of piloting. It is a cage, Kael, she admitted, her voice low. But it is a cage that gives me strength. My life was planned for me since the day I was born. Marry Kaelin, breed the next heir, and uphold the status quo. My mother is powerful, but she cannot defy the entire inner circle alone. She needs a symbol that is so audacious, so unprecedented, that it shatters tradition. And that's me, Kael said. That is you, Selena confirmed, leaning her head against his shoulder, a gesture that was completely informal and purely Selena, not the high heir. You are the sunless void courage that the prophecy speaks of. When I was clinging to that wreckage, I knew I was going to die. But when I saw your clumsy, battered human suit flying towards me, it felt like a defiance of the universe. I want that defiance, Kael. I want you. I want a life that is not planned for me, and you are my only chance for it. Kael felt a powerful surge of emotion, a mix of fear, responsibility, and an overwhelming affection for this isolated, brave alien princess. He put his arm around her, and they watched the luminous galaxy stream past the window, two figures from different worlds, bound together by an act of desperation and a twist of fate. The royal transport pierced the atmospheric shield of Aethelgard's capital city, the Golden Citadel, on the primary continent of Sola. The descent was breathtaking. The city was unlike any Kael had ever imagined, a sprawl of towers that corkscrewed into the sky, constructed entirely of light-refracting, golden crystal that pulsed with soft energy. Rivers of pure liquid light flowed between the buildings, and massive, elegant air skimmers zipped through designated paths. Kael, standing beside Selena in the massive viewing chamber, felt his breath catch. "It's impossible," he whispered. "Welcome home, Beacon," Selena murmured, adjusting her ceremonial collar. The arrival ceremony was broadcast across the entire planet. Kael, clad in a stiff, sapphire-blue uniform embroidered with Aethelgardian symbols, a gift from Selena, stood beside Empress Vastra and Selena on a colossal platform built over a sea of glowing flora. The Empress, standing before the gathered dignitaries, began her address. Her voice, booming across the continent, detailed Kael's rescue, his bravery, and the solemn invocation of the unbreakable bond. "And by this ancient sacrament," Empress Vastra declared, her voice ringing with authority, "Kael Weston of the Human Confederacy is formally recognized as the Sentinel Protector to the High Heir Selena. He is granted full rights of residency, a seat in the Grand Advisory Council, directly beneath the heirs, and is afforded the Empress's absolute, personal protection. Let any who question his status question the will of the sovereign." The crowd, a sea of nobles and citizens stretching back to the horizon, erupted in a synchronized, resonant chant of approval. The sound was an ancient, deep harmonic that vibrated in Kael's chest. As the ceremony concluded, the endless procession of nobles and diplomats began, offering formal salutations. Most were polite, offering cautious greetings and showing a stiff, forced respect for the Empress's decree. Then, Vizier Theron approached. He moved with cold, deliberate slowness, his black robes giving him the menacing air of a raptor. He stopped directly in front of Kael, ignoring Selena entirely. "Sentinel Protector Kael Weston," Theron drawled, his voice pitched just low enough that only those immediately around them could hear. His translator rendered his Aethelgardian speech as silky and contemptuous. "You have been granted a most generous elevation. One might call it a rather unearned ascension." Kael remembered Selena's lessons. Hold eye contact, then avert at the second dip. Theron offered no dip, only a stare of pure ice. "Vizier Theron," Kael replied, keeping his voice even. "I am here by the command of the Empress and by the right of the sacrament." Theron tilted his head, a gesture of profound mockery. "The sacrament is not a reward for simple, desperate pilot work, human. It is a spiritual contract. Tell me, do you comprehend the luminance? Do you understand the cosmic significance of the sunless void prophecy?" Kael felt a flush rise in his neck. He knew the words, but he didn't understand the spiritual concept. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. "I understand my duty," Kael said, avoiding the deeper philosophical trap. Theron seized the moment. "Duty is the language of a servant, not a sentinel. You are a dull blade in a jeweled scabbard, Kael Weston. Your humankind has no spiritual resonance, no comprehension of the inner truth that governs the High Heir's destiny. You are a stain on the court, a political plaything, and a disgrace to the title. I will see you stripped of your station, and I promise you, when I have proven you unworthy, the consequences will not be a simple decree of dismissal. They will be absolute." Before Kael could formulate a response that was both respectful and defiant, Selena stepped forward, placing her hand firmly on Kael's arm. "Vizier," Selena's voice was like ice. "The Sentinel Protector is currently adapting to the spiritual gravity of our homeworld. Your counsel is appreciated, but I require your immediate presence at the Star Chart Chamber. I have questions regarding the recent anomalies in the Outer Veil. Now." Selena's use of her high air authority was a clear dismissal. Theron's twilight eyes narrowed, but he offered a shallow, furious bow to Selena. "Of course, High Heir. My duty is to your inquiries," he said, before turning his full, hateful gaze back to Kael. "Enjoy the light while it lasts, Beacon. All false stars eventually burn out." Theron stalked away, his three-person entourage following him like shadows. Kael felt his jaw unclench. "That was your first test," Selena murmured, her hand still resting on his arm, a public display of support. "You hesitated." He saw it. "Never let him see weakness, Kael. Never." "I don't understand the spiritual part, Selena," Kael confessed. "I don't know what luminance means to your people." "It means your soul's purity, your moral light," Selena explained, guiding him away from the lingering gaze of the lesser nobles. "Theron is telling the court you are spiritually dark, a primitive. We must prove him wrong, and fast. I will arrange a private session with the Oracle of the Void." The next week was a torturous immersion into Aethelgardian high society. Kael was assigned an elaborate retinue, a squad of silent, silver-clad guards, and a small staff of personal attendants, who were all subtly watching his every move, ready to report any transgression to the Vizier's spies. Selena kept him close, attending every dinner, every council meeting, and every public appearance. She was a constant, shimmering shield. Kael learned to eat the strange, glowing foods, to distinguish between the subtle shades of ceremonial robes, and to execute the complex bows with muscle memory. Yet despite his improvements, the hostility from the inner circle was palpable. At the Grand Council meetings, Vizier Theron would constantly pepper Kael with philosophical questions related to ancient Aethelgardian principles, concepts Kael had only superficially grasped. "Sentinel Protector," Theron began one afternoon, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "We discussed the taxation of the outer colonies. As the Beacon, you represent the sunless void, the chaotic potential beyond our order. Kindly enlighten the Council. Should chaos be strictly regulated, or should it be allowed to express its inherent, violent nature?" Kael knew the answer Theron expected, that chaos must be strictly regulated, supporting Theron's rigid, isolationist policies. But Selena had taught him that the Empress's vision was one of ordered potential, integrating new ideas without destroying tradition. "Vizier," Kael replied, speaking slowly, his translator giving his human voice an unfamiliar resonance. "The void, I know, is not violent. It is empty. Chaos is merely potential waiting for direction. A well-piloted ship uses the void to move faster than light. Aethelgard should regulate the speed and trajectory of this potential, but never stifle the potential itself. I propose a system of regulated integration." A shocked silence fell over the council. Kael had not only answered the question, but had used a metaphor, a pilot's metaphor, that twisted Theron's intended trap into a philosophical argument for the Empress's platform. Theron's face flushed a deep, unpleasant violet. "An intriguing, if simplified, metaphor," Theron sneered, recovering quickly. "One that clearly demonstrates the Sentinel's reliance on mere mechanics rather than true luminance." But Empress Vastra, sitting on her gilded throne, offered a slow, approving nod. "The Sentinel's point is noted." Next item. Later that evening, in a secluded chamber of the Royal Library, Selena smiled, a genuine smile of victory. "You did well, Kael. You used your primitiveness as a weapon. Theron won't try that specific attack again." He's just getting started, Kael noted, running a hand through his hair. I feel like I'm playing three-dimensional chess with someone who can see into the fourth dimension. Which is why you need the oracle, Selena confirmed. It's not enough to speak the right words. You need to understand the why of the prophecy. I've arranged the meeting for tonight, after the moonset ritual. It's dangerous, Kael. The oracle is bound to tell the absolute truth, and the truth may not be what either of us wants to hear. Kael followed Selena through the silent, glowing halls of the Golden Citadel to the Temple of the Sunless Void. The temple was an ancient, black obsidian structure, a stark contrast to the golden crystal city, and it was built in a deep valley, away from the three suns' light. The Oracle of the Void was a creature of immense age, shrouded in thick, gray silk. She sat on a simple stone dais, the light of a single flickering flame illuminating her wrinkled silver face. Selena performed the complex bowing ritual for a spiritual figure, but the oracle simply gestured for Kael to step forward. The human who carries the unbreakable bond. The oracle's voice was dry and raspy, like crumbling rock. The High Heir's defiance. The Empress's political gambit. All paths lead to the same thread. Oracle, Selena requested formally, speak the truth of the prophecy. Is Kael Weston truly the sentinel of the heir's reign? The oracle looked at Kael. Her eyes were not gold-flecked, like the royal line, but pure deep violet, the color of the Deep Scythe Nebula itself. Kael felt like she was looking not at his body, but directly into his soul. The prophecy of the sunless void is true, the oracle intoned. It states that when the heir is saved by a beacon from the outer worlds, carrying sunless courage, the bond will be sealed. But the prophecy continues. It does not merely make him protector, High Heir. It binds him to the fate of your civilization. How? Kael asked, cutting past the formalities, unable to contain his impatience. The oracle smiled, a disturbing, ancient sight. When the bond is invoked, the sentinel does not merely protect the heir, he becomes a vital energy conduit. The High Heir's life and the life force of Aethelgard itself, the very luminance of your people, is drawing on the beacon's primitive yet potent soul energy. Your human spirit, Kael Weston, is the catalyst that is healing the heir and stabilizing the Empress's weakening power. Selena gasped, taking a step back. That is not written in the modern texts. Mother never told me. It is the forbidden truth, the oracle stated calmly. The Empress knew the bond would stabilize the heir after the attack. But the cost is this. The beacon, the sentinel, must remain on Aethelgard. His life force is now tethered to the High Heir's life. If he leaves this world, or if the bond is severed by betrayal, the heir will instantly succumb to her injuries, and the luminance of Aethelgard will flicker and die. The oracle leaned closer to Kael, her voice dropping to a horrifying, conspiratorial whisper. Vizier Theron knows this secret. He is not trying to simply discredit you, human. He is planning to sever the bond. And when he does, he will watch your death kill the High Heir and destabilize the Empress's reign in a single stroke. He plans to take your sacrifice and Selena's death to seize the throne. Kael felt a sudden, profound coldness, worse than the vacuum of space. He wasn't just in danger. Selena's life, and perhaps the life of this entire alien world, depended on his continued survival and loyalty. He was a living battery, a philosophical lightning rod, and the ultimate pawn. The stakes had just become infinitely higher. There is more, the oracle continued, her eyes pinning Kael in place. The sacrament is not just a protection, but a fulfillment. The full, unbreakable. Bond must be completed within the next 3 cycles. If it is not, the bond will wither, and the same disaster will occur. Kael knew exactly what the completion of the bond meant, recalling Selena's earlier warning. It meant the political marriage. Selina, recovering from the shock, stepped forward, her voice trembling. Oracle, the vizier, what is his exact method for the severance? He will use the most ancient of Aethelgardian rites, the trial of unworthiness, the oracle replied. He will lure you to the Temple of the Forsaken, a place where the Empress's protection cannot reach, and there he will challenge the spiritual purity of the human soul. If you fail to demonstrate the luminance that the prophecy demands, the bond will break, and the darkness will consume you both. And how do I win this trial? Kael asked, his voice steady now, his pilot's instinct for problem-solving overriding his fear. You must demonstrate that you came from the sunless void, not for power or reward or simple obligation, but for unconditional courage, the oracle finished. You must show him the selfless truth of the human spirit. Show him why the fates chose you, the simple void runner, to be the sentinel protector of Aethelgard. Kael and Selina left the temple in stunned silence. The glowing city of the Golden Citadel seemed less beautiful now, more like a glittering trap. My mother, Selina began, her voice cracking. She knew the bond was drawing on your life force, and she didn't tell me. She was protecting her kingdom, Kael said quietly, though the knowledge stung. She put her duty to her people above her duty to you, and above my life. That's what queens do. No, Selina insisted, gripping his arm tightly as they walked through the deserted halls. A queen should not risk the purity of the bond. This makes Theron's attack all the more certain. He knows she has been compromised by expediency. He will call for the trial immediately. Then we prepare for the trial of unworthiness, Kael said, his decision made. I need to understand this unconditional courage they're looking for. Cora, he whispered to his datapad. I need every human historical account of self-sacrifice, every myth, every legend of a hero who gave up everything without question. I need to know the truth of the human spirit. Selina shook her head, her eyes wide with worry. Kael, Theron will use illusions, spiritual probes. He will tear your memories apart. The trial is designed to expose the soul's deepest, most selfish desire. He will try to show that you saved me for a reward, for a princess, for power. And if he finds even a hint of that ambition, the bond breaks. Then I need to be sure, Kael replied, meeting her gaze. I need to be absolutely certain of why I flew into that nebula. And I need to beat him at his own game. 2 days later, at the Grand Council, Vizier Theron rose, his obsidian robes swirling dramatically. Empress Vastra, High Heir Selina, esteemed council, Theron announced, his voice carrying the authority of his centuries of service. I commend the bravery of the Sentinel Protector, Kael Weston. However, the integrity of the unbreakable bond, and thus the stability of Aethelgard itself, is paramount. Whispers of his unworthiness, of his limited spiritual capacity, have created schisms in the inner circle. I respectfully invoke the right of the Vizierate to challenge the Sentinel's spiritual integrity through the ancient trial of unworthiness. A collective gasp went through the council chamber. The Empress's face remained stone still, but Selina's head snapped up, her expression a mix of fury and fear. Vizier, Empress Vastra's voice was sharp. The trial is an obsolete rite. It has not been invoked in 3 millennia. I deny the petition. With all respect, Your Majesty, the law is absolute, Theron countered, bowing low. When the stability of the bond is challenged by the Vizierate, the sovereign cannot deny the trial. This is stated in the Sacred Scroll, Section Beta 12. Your Majesty's oath binds you to uphold the truth, regardless of the consequences. The Empress closed her eyes for a long moment, the pulsed light of her crown dimming slightly. Kael knew the Empress's hands were tied. To deny the law would be to admit weakness and give Theron the moral high ground. "The trial is granted," the Empress finally decreed, her voice heavy with resignation. "It will be held at the Temple of the Forsaken, at the next triple moonrise. Sentinel Protector Kael Weston, do you accept the challenge?" Kael stood, feeling every eye in the chamber focused on him. He could see Selena shaking her head slightly, warning him against accepting, fearing the inevitable trap. But Kael knew that if he refused, Theron would declare him a coward, and the outcome would be the same: severance and death. "I accept the trial," Kael announced, his voice echoing in the massive hall. "Vizier Theron, I will show you and this entire court the true luminance of the human spirit, and I will expose your false heart." The 2 cycles leading up to the trial were the quietest of Kael's life on Aethelgard. The court became a ghost town, the nobles retreating to their estates to await the outcome. Selina was confined to her private chambers, a rule Kael understood. The purity of the bond had to be uninfluenced before the trial. Kael spent his time alone, meditating on the oracle's words, guided by Korra's constant stream of data. He had to distill unconditional courage down to a single, defensible truth. He reviewed every moment of the rescue: the decision to fly in, the spacewalk, the moment he grabbed her arm. Was there a selfish motive? Was he hoping for a reward, for recognition, for a relationship? Analysis of your internal monologue logs from the incident suggests no primary selfish motivation, Kael, Korra reported on his datapad. The core impulse was a simple, pragmatic desire to prevent a death, despite the catastrophic risk. We could call it basic human decency. "That's too simple for a spiritual trial, Korra," Kael sighed, running a hand over the elaborate carvings on his chamber wall. "They won't accept decency. Theron will find a way to make it look like arrogance or recklessness." He remembered something Selena had told him about Aethelgardian spirituality. Their concept of the soul was tied to its ability to project its truth, its luminance, onto the universe. Theron wouldn't probe for lies, he'd probe for hidden desires. Kael realized the only way to win was to expose a truth that was so pure, so devoid of personal gain, that it transcended the concepts of power and lineage that Theron understood. The human spirit, Kael concluded, was defined not by its desire to gain, but its willingness to lose. The night of the triple moonrise arrived, casting an eerie, 3-way shadow across the golden citadel. Kael, stripped of his ceremonial robes and wearing only a simple gray utility uniform, was escorted to the Temple of the Forsaken, a massive, silent complex deep beneath the citadel. Empress Vastra and Selena were present, sitting on thrones made of polished stone, their faces grim. Theron stood opposite them, cloaked entirely in black, flanked by his supporters. The council members filled the rest of the seating, their anticipation a palpable, anxious energy. "Sentinel Protector Kael Weston," Theron's voice boomed in the echo-filled chamber. "The bond of Aethelgard demands absolute purity. The trial of unworthiness will now commence. The oracle's truth-seers will bind your mind and delve into the moment of salvation. Show us the luminance of the human spirit, or face the consequences." Kael walked to the center of the chamber, where a circular platform of shimmering, violet energy awaited. He lay down upon it, and the energy field enclosed him, a warm, humming pressure. 2 robed Aethelgardian truth-seers placed their hands on his temples. Kael closed his eyes. Instantly, the familiar chaos of the Deep Scythe Nebula materialized in his mind's eye. He was back in his worn emergency suit, flying toward the wreckage. Theron's voice, amplified and distorted, became the voice of Kael's inner accuser. "Why did you go, human? What did you hope to gain?" The mental image shifted. Kael saw himself flying toward the wreckage, but this time, in his mind's eye, Theron introduced a phantom. A glowing chest of Aethelgardian gold, jewels and power, the ultimate treasure, appeared, floating beside Selena. Was it for wealth? Was it to escape your scavenger life? Theron demanded, his voice echoing in Kael's memory. Kael felt the mental pull toward the gold, a genuine temptation implanted by the seers. But in his memory, Kael's phantom hand didn't reach for the gold. His eyes were fixed on the struggling figure. "False!" Kael shouted mentally, projecting his intent. The illusion shattered. I didn't even see the gold. I was focused only on the life sign. The scene shifted again. Kael saw Selena's beautiful, alien face and the warm press of her hand on his in the medical bay. Was it for the princess? To satisfy a base, primitive hunger for the royal blood, to sit beside the throne? Kael saw the beautiful future, power, love, an endless life with Selena. He felt the mental desire. It was real, profound, but it was secondary to the initial action. He focused on the moment before he saw her face, before he knew she was a princess. I didn't know who she was. I only saw a life failing, Kael projected. My action was taken when she was still an unknown, a risk, a burden. The desire to know her came after the decision to save her. The illusion of the beautiful future faltered. Theron was growing visibly frustrated in the real world, his fist clenched. "He is resisting the temptation of gain," Theron hissed to the Empress. "But there is one final, ultimate truth that all primitives desire: acceptance." The mental scene changed one last time. Kael was back on Earth, standing on the balcony of his family's dilapidated apartment, looking out at the smog-choked, forgotten city. He saw his younger self, lonely and craving respect. Theron's voice became soft, seductive. "You saved her, so she and her Empress would accept you. So they would give your insignificant human life meaning. That is your selfish desire, Kael Weston. You saved her for your own validation. This temptation was the hardest." Kael felt the profound, aching truth of it. He did want to be worthy. He did want Selena's people to see the value in humanity. He felt the bond shudder, the violet light around him flickering wildly. "He's right," a voice of doubt screamed in his mind. "I did it for acceptance." But then, Kael remembered his simple, core impulse in the nebula. He remembered his conversation with Cora. He focused on the moment he stepped into the airlock, knowing he was going into a possible death trap. "Theron is wrong," Kael shouted with all his spiritual might. "I didn't go for acceptance. I went for the loss. I went because the weight of the risk was absolute. I knew if I failed, I would die alone, unremembered, deep in the nebula." Kael projected the ultimate truth. The unconditional courage of humanity is not the desire for life or love or acceptance. It is the willingness to sacrifice the self completely for the sake of the unknown other. I flew in knowing I would lose everything, and I would do it again, not for her, but for the simple, absolute principle of life preservation over self-preservation. I saved her not to gain a princess, but to prove that life, any life, is worth the cost of mine. Kael's projected thought hit Theron like a physical blow. The simple, selfless power of the statement was so pure it was incomprehensible to the vizier's power-hungry mind. The violet light surrounding Kael erupted into a blinding golden luminance, the full spiritual realization of the Sentinel. The bond was not only validated, it was strengthened to an unbreakable state. Theron recoiled, staggering back from the surge of spiritual power. The truth-seers cried out and pulled their hands away, overwhelmed. Empress Vastra rose slowly from her throne, her face a mask of shock and awe. The entire council was silent, bathed in the glow of Kael's absolute truth. "Vizier Theron," Empress Vastra declared, her voice ringing with final authority. "The Sentinel Protector has passed the trial. His bond is true. His courage is unconditional." "Impossible!" Theron screamed, his control finally breaking. "He is a primitive. He lies. It is a trick." "The Oracle's seers were bound to the truth," the Empress stated. "Your challenge is ended, Vizier. The Sentinel's truth has exposed your own. Your actions were not driven by law, but by your desire to destabilize the throne and claim the heir's position through force and political manipulation. You challenged a hero and revealed a traitor." Empress Vastra turned to her Praetorian guards. "Vizier Theron is hereby stripped of all titles and positions. Confine him to the Temple of the Forsaken until his crimes against the crown and the heir can be judged. The trial is over." Theron, raving about human corruption, was dragged away by the guards. Selena ran to Kael, who was still recovering on the platform. She embraced him tightly, tears of pure golden light streaming down her face. "You did it, Kael. You truly are the Sentinel," she whispered into his ear. Kael was exhausted, but victorious. He had not only saved his life and Selena's, but he had fundamentally altered the political and spiritual trajectory of Aethelgard. The path ahead, however, was still fraught with the complexities of love, duty, and the immense gulf between two vastly different worlds. He was the Sentinel now, and his new life had just begun. He still had a kingdom to protect. The next day, the entire Golden Citadel felt lighter. The atmosphere of fear and political tension noticeably lifted. The downfall of Vizier Theron had sent a shockwave through the inner circle, silencing the most xenophobic opposition to the Empress's reforms. Kael, now officially the Sentinel Protector with a spiritually validated bond, was no longer just a curiosity. He was a political and religious force. His new status granted him privileges and responsibilities that surpassed those of most Aethelgardian nobles. His personal quarters were upgraded further, equipped with a direct, encrypted communication link to Korra and his ship, the Swift, which had been carefully towed from Beacon Sigma and stored in the Imperial hangar. His guard detail was doubled, now composed of Praetorians who viewed him with genuine respect. However, his most immediate concern remained the final step of the bond, the marriage. Selena found Kael in the royal gardens, where the flora pulsed with soft, multicolored light. She wore a simple, unbound silk dress, a rare departure from her formal robes, signifying a moment of private intimacy. "The Empress has decreed the formal union will take place in 2 cycles," Selena announced, her voice soft but direct. 2 cycles. That's fast," Kael noted, sitting on a crystal bench. "There's no need to rush. Theron is gone." "Theron is gone, but the luminance is still unstable," Selena explained, sitting beside him. "The Oracle was clear. The bond must be fully completed to permanently stabilize both my life force and the Empire's internal energy flow. You, Kael, are the lightning rod, and I am the conduit. We must join to ground the power." Kael took her hand, tracing the elegant, sharp lines of her palm. "You're saying that if we don't complete the union, your life is still at risk?" "Yes," she confirmed, looking into his eyes. "But it's not just that, Kael. The trial, the absolute truth of your soul, changed things for me too. I don't see this as a political necessity anymore. I see it as fate. I truly believe our 2 souls are now aligned, a beacon and a sentinel. I want this, Kael, not just for Aethelgard, but for us." The admission stripped away the last of Kael's pragmatic reservations. He looked at the vast alien garden and realized that his simple Void Runner life was over. He was bound to this world and this woman. I want it too, Selina, he confessed. But there are still things I don't understand about your culture, about your future, about us. Ask, Sentinel, Selina encouraged, leaning closer. The bond requires absolute honesty. Your lifespan, Kael began. You live for 200 years. I'm human. 80, maybe 90, with advanced human medtech. What happens when I'm old and frail, and you're still young enough to be my daughter? Will the bond transfer to someone else? Will you leave me? Selina's golden eyes filled with a tenderness that spanned millennia. Aethelgardian life is long, but it is often dull, Kael. Yours is short, but it is intense, a supernova of experience. When we bond, our life forces merge. The prophecy speaks of the beacon's flame, sustaining the heir's luminance. Your intense, short life will transfer its vitality to mine, yes. But the marriage ritual also grants you access to Aethelgardian longevity protocols, a process that will extend your own life, not to my 2 centuries, but certainly to twice the human norm, perhaps more. More importantly, Kael, the bond is unbreakable. When you die, my soul will carry the full imprint of your spirit, your courage. I will live the rest of my life as both Selina and Kael. I will never leave you. Her answer was terrifying and beautiful, an acceptance of their tragic, temporal difference. It was the Aethelgardian way of saying, I will always be faithful. And the purpose of the Sentinel? Kael asked. Now that Theron is gone, what is my duty? Theron's faction is defeated, not destroyed, Selina replied, her expression turning serious. They still exist in the outer colonies and among the minor noble houses. Your presence, Kael, is the symbol of integration. Your duty is to become the Empress's voice to the human confederacy and the wider outer worlds, and to be my personal counter-counsel, the voice of necessary disruption. You will help me forge the new Aethelgard, an empire that looks outward, not inward. You will teach us how to be brave. Kael felt the immense weight of that task. It was not a title, it was a revolution. He realized the Empress hadn't just needed a shield. She needed a philosophical wedge to splinter the ancient, ossified traditions. And he, the Void Runner, was it. So, I'm the human ambassador and royal consort, Kael mused, a small, wry smile crossing his face. Yes, Selina confirmed, returning his smile. With one immediate, critical duty, learning the Union ritual. It is 3 days of spiritual immersion, Kael, and it is far more complex than the trial of unworthiness. You need to prove your spiritual strength to the entire cosmos, not just the Council. The Union ritual, the sacrament of eternal resonance, began at the heart of the Golden Citadel in the Grand Crystal Spire. It was an event that would be recorded in Aethelgardian history as the moment the Empire turned outward. Kael and Selina stood on a platform of pure, humming crystal, bathed in the synthesized light of 1,000 distant stars. They wore robes woven from gold and silver wire, and the Empress Vastra performed the binding ceremony. The first day was the resonance of the past, a spiritual journey into the ancestry of the High Heir. Kael was linked to Selina's mind, witnessing 20 millennia of Aethelgardian history, the rise of the Empire, the wisdom of the first Empresses, the terrible xenophobic wars, and the peaceful, if stagnant, present. Kael absorbed the glory and the trauma, gaining an understanding of the culture's fierce pride and its paralyzing fear of the unknown. The second day was the resonance of the present, a merging of the two individuals' truths. Kael and Selina knelt, their hands placed over a spinning orb of pure luminance energy. They shared their memories, Kael's childhood on Earth, his struggle as a void runner, the sheer joy of piloting, the loneliness of space. Selina's structured, isolated life, her quiet rebellion against the arranged marriage, her fear of failing her mother. The shared intimacy was staggering, more profound than any physical act. By the end of the day, Kael knew Selena's soul better than he knew his own. Selena knew the desperation and self-sacrificial decency of the human spirit. The third day was the resonance of the future, the final, eternal binding. Kael and Selena stood, facing each other, and the Empress spoke the final words of the covenant. "High Heir Selena, do you accept this life force, this spirit, this sentinel, to be your eternal resonance?" "I do, Empress." Selena's voice was strong and clear. "Sentinel Protector Kael Weston, do you give this life, this spirit, this courage, to be the eternal foundation of your heir's reign?" Kael looked into Selena's eyes, seeing not the princess, but the vulnerable, determined woman who had laughed by his side. "I give my life, my spirit, and my courage," Kael vowed. "To her and to Aethelgard. Eternally." As he spoke the last word, the crystal platform erupted in a brilliant, non-harmful flash of golden light. Kael felt a deep, warm pulse travel from his heart through his hand and into Selena's. It was a transfer of energy, a merging of two destinies. He felt an instant surge of vitality, a subtle change in his very biology, the Aethelgardian longevity protocols taking hold. He was no longer just Kael Weston. He was the sentinel, the beacon, the co-pilot of Selena's destiny. The final moment of the union was marked by a colossal public celebration. The populace cheered. The loyal nobles offered sincere congratulations. The Empress Vastra, stepping down from the platform, embraced both Selena and Kael, her smile finally reaching her golden eyes. "Welcome to the family, Sentinel," she said, her voice full of genuine relief and affection. The inner circle had been decisively broken. The path for Selena's outward-looking reign was clear. Kael and Selena spent the next year fulfilling the demands of the bond. Kael took his seat on the Grand Advisory Council, his primitive pragmatism often providing the exact kind of disruptive insight the stagnant empire needed. He championed the creation of a diplomatic corps to engage with the outer worlds, using his own relationship with the human confederacy as the first, critical step in Aethelgard's new diplomatic era. He traveled to the outer colonies, where his status as a former Void Runner allowed him to connect with the populace in a way that the isolationist nobles never could, diffusing several nascent rebellions. Selena, guided by Kael's counsel, became a more effective and outward-looking leader. Her focus shifted from preserving tradition to cultivating strength through diversity, and the empire began to thrive under their shared vision. Kael never forgot his past. He brought Cora Vance, his synthetic co-pilot, into the royal court, integrating her unique, non-biological consciousness into the Citadel's advisory matrix, a move that further enraged the last remnants of Theron's xenophobic faction, but proved invaluable to the state. And the Swift, Kael's old patrol cutter, was enshrined in the Imperial hangar, a symbol of the sunless courage that had saved the Empire. The final challenge came not from a political rival, but from the universe itself. The outer veil, the nebula Kael had flown through, began to destabilize, a massive intergalactic anomaly that threatened to consume Aethelgardian space. The Grand Council, faced with a problem of mechanics rather than politics, turned to their Sentinel Protector. "Sentinel," Empress Vastra addressed Kael, "your expertise in the void is required." The ancient star charts hold no solution to this anomaly. Kael, who had spent the last year flying a desk, felt his pilot's blood stir. He studied the data, Cora and Selena by his side. "The anomaly is a singularity that requires a controlled, counter-gravitational force to stabilize," Kael explained. "We need a ship with an experimental drive core, something small, fast, and agile enough to penetrate the edge of the collapse." Selina placed her hand on his arm, her eyes full of the familiar fear he had seen in the nebula. "It's a suicide mission, Kael. We cannot risk the Sentinel." "We risk the Empire if we do nothing," Kael countered, squeezing her hand. "And I know the perfect ship for the job." Kael stood in the Imperial hangar, in the cockpit of his beloved the Swift. The old cutter had been completely retrofitted with Aethelgardian technology, a shimmering new hull, a powerful crystal-based warp drive, and weapon systems that hummed with impossible energy. Yet the controls and the feel of the seat were exactly the same. Cora's holographic form shimmered beside him. "Ready to fly, Captain?" Cora asked, her voice cheerful. "Ready to fly," Kael confirmed. He was no longer doing it for decency, or survival, or acceptance. He was doing it for Selina, for his home, for the future he had helped build. He was doing it because the Sentinel Protector of Aethelgard was the only man capable of the job. Selina stood on the viewing platform with the Empress, her expression serene and resolute. Kael knew she trusted him. As the Swift prepared for launch, Kael initiated a final, encrypted comm link to Selina's private channel. "When I get back," Kael said, a familiar human grin on his face, "I expect you to start designing a truly ridiculous human-alien hybrid shuttle for our honeymoon. Something with flames." Selina laughed, a bright, melodic sound that promised centuries of happiness. "Fly well, my beacon. I will be waiting eternally." Kael engaged the new warp drive, the old cutter tearing into the sky, into the stars, and into the final, unknown destiny of Aethelgard. He had started as a scavenger looking for a jackpot, and he had found something far more valuable: a love that defied distance, an empire that defied stagnation, and a purpose that defied death. The Void Runner had become the Sentinel, the true hero of two worlds,